My best friend demanded $20,000 for cleaning dog hair and threatened to have my 2 retrievers seized and euthanized if I did not pay up within 24 hours. I thought I was driving to her beautiful Connecticut home to mourn the death of my father, but I was actually walking into a blackmail trap set by the person I trusted most in this world. Sarah Miller used her son's fake asthma and my own grief against me, convinced that I was a helpless victim who would write a check just to make the pain stop. She was wrong. I did not pay her a dime. Instead, I exposed her lies to her entire neighborhood, and now she has lost her home, her husband, and custody of her children. I am sitting here in the dark, trembling, listening to my dogs breathe, and wondering if I am the villain for destroying her life, or if she deserved every bit of the karma that hit her. How does a friendship of 15 years end with a police officer searching my car for stolen cash that never existed? If someone threatened to kill the only family you had left just to pay off their gambling debts, would you have destroyed them too? My name is Nora Vance. I am 32 years old, a freelance graphic designer who usually lives in a cluttered, rain-slicked studio apartment in the Capitol Hill district of Seattle. I have no husband, no children, and as of 4 days ago, no parents. I am an orphan in a tax bracket that barely qualifies as middle class, surviving on coffee and deadline adrenaline. But if you looked at me on that gray Tuesday afternoon in late October, you would have seen a lie. I was driving an obsidian black Cadillac Escalade, a beast of a vehicle that smelled of new leather and aggressive climate control. It was a free upgrade from the rental agency at the Hartford airport because they had run out of the economy sedans I actually booked. To the outside world, I looked like an heiress returning to her estate. To the 2 golden retrievers panting anxiously in the backseat, Luna and Bear, I was just the source of treats and confusing sorrow. We were winding through the manicured streets of Westport, Connecticut. This was not the grit of the city. This was a world of invisible fences, 3-car garages, and lawns that looked like they were trimmed with nail scissors. I was here to bury my father, a man who left me nothing but a box of old photographs and a mountain of medical debt that I had not yet figured out how to pay. I gripped the steering wheel tight, my knuckles white against the black leather. My eyes felt swollen, gritty, from 96 hours of intermittent crying. I needed a place to stay, just for 3 days, just until the funeral was over and I could sell my father's rusted truck and fly back to my small, safe life in Washington. And that was when Sarah offered. Sarah Miller, my college roommate from a decade ago. We had drifted apart, relegated to the realm of polite Instagram likes and generic birthday texts. But when I posted about my father's passing, she had descended like a guardian angel. Come stay with me. She had messaged, Mark is away on business for half the week. The kids are at camp, and I have a guest suite. Bring the dogs. Seriously. Bring them. I have a huge yard. It will be a sanctuary for you. A sanctuary. That was the word she used. I clung to that word. I pulled the massive sport utility vehicle into the driveway of number 42, Oak Ridge Lane. The house was imposing. A colonial revival with white pillars and black shutters that looked freshly painted. The lawn was a vibrant, unnatural green, devoid of a single fallen leaf, despite it being autumn. It felt less like a home and more like a stage set. Inner monologue. I should have turned the engine off and sat there for a moment. I should have listened to the knot tightening in my stomach. It was not grief, it was instinct, but I was too tired to listen. I just wanted to sleep. I saw the front door open before I even unbuckled my seatbelt. Sarah stepped out. She looked exactly as she did on social media. Blonde hair blown out to perfection, wearing a beige cashmere cardigan that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and white linen pants. Who wears white linen pants to greet a friend with 2 large dogs? She waved, a frantic, enthusiastic motion that did not quite match the stillness of the neighborhood. I opened the car door and stepped onto the paved driveway. The air was crisp and smelled of damp earth and money. "Nora," Sarah squealed, rushing toward me. She stopped about a foot away, her eyes scanning me from head to toe, then darting to the Cadillac behind me. "Oh my God, honey, you made it," she said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper appropriate for a funeral context. She pulled me into a hug. It was light, airy. Her body did not press against mine. She hovered, patting my back with stiff fingers. "Thank you so much for this, Sarah," I said, my voice cracking. Saoiting Haling. 2 hash is greater than I did not want to be alone at a hotel. "Of course." She pulled back, holding me at arm's length. Her eyes were blue, piercing, and they lingered on the Cadillac again. "I see you traveled in style. Business must be booming in Seattle." Or, "Saoiting Haling. 2 hash is greater than, did your father leave you a little surprise?" She winked. It was a quick, almost imperceptible twitch of her eyelid, implying a shared secret about hidden fortunes. Inner monologue. "Correct her. Tell her it is a rental upgrade. Tell her your bank account is overdrawn." But I did not. I was ashamed of my poverty in front of her perfection. I just gave a weak, non-committal smile. That was my first mistake. I let her paint the picture she wanted to see. Actually, it was just Saoiting Haling. "Dos numeral. Es mayor que conveniente," I mumbled. Sarah nodded knowingly. "Well, you deserve it. Self-care is expensive, right?" Suddenly, a deep bark echoed from the car. Bear pressed his wet nose against the tinted window, leaving a smudge. Sarah flinched. It was not a jump of surprise. It was a physical recoil, like she had seen a rat. Her eyes narrowed at the smudge on the glass. "Oh, the babies," she said, her tone shifting up an octave, becoming saccharine, sweet, but lacking warmth. "They are Saoiting Haling. 2 big. You said retrievers, but I pictured Saoiting Haling. 2 hash is greater than I do not know. Puppies? They are 6 and 7. I explained, moving to the back door. "They are well behaved. I promise. I brought their crates and their own blankets. They will not touch your furniture." I opened the door, and Luna, the golden female, hopped out first. She stretched, her tail wagging slowly, looking for a patch of grass. Bear followed, shaking his fur, sending a few loose strands floating into the pristine Connecticut air. Sarah watched one of those golden hairs float in the sunlight. Her eyes tracked it until it landed on the asphalt of the driveway. She stared at it for a full second before looking back at me with a strained smile. "Okay," she said, clapping her hands once. "So, here's the situation. The house is just Saoiting Haling. 2 hash is greater than well. We just had the floors redone. Like, last week. Imported French oak. Mark would kill me if they got scratched." I froze, leash in hand. "Sarah, if it is a problem, I can go to a kennel." I checked. "There is one in..." No, do not be silly," she interrupted, waving her hand dismissively, though her eyes were still fixed on Bear's paws. You are family. We just need to be. 小语境号令. To hash is greater than mindful. We have a system. Shoes off in the garage. Paws wiped before entering. And maybe. 小语境号令. To hash is greater than maybe they can stay in the sunroom? It is heated. It is basically part of the house. The sunroom, not the guest suite. That sounds fine, I said, feeling a wave of exhaustion. I just want to be respectful of your home. I know you do. Nora, Sarah Sihil. A long, tragic sound. I am doing this because I know how hard it is. When my grandmother died, I was a wreck. But we have to keep standards, right? Chaos in the mind does not mean chaos in the house. She turned and began walking toward the front door, her heels clicking rhythmically on the stone path. Come on, she called out without looking back. Let us get you settled. I made herbal tea. It is supposed to be cleansing. I grabbed my duffel bag and the bag of dog food. I whistled softly for Luna and Bear to heal. They pressed close to my legs, sensing my anxiety. As we walked toward the porch, I noticed something on the front lawn, right next to the path. There was a small sign. It was not a political sign or a security system warning. It was a custom-made wooden plaque with cursive lettering that read, "Please respect the sanctity of this lawn. Violators will be judged." It was meant to be a joke, a cute, suburban witticism. But as I watched Sarah stop to pick up a microscopic twig that had fallen on her walkway, flinging it into the bushes with a grimace of annoyance, the sign did not feel funny. It felt like a warning. I looked at the massive house looming over me. The windows were dark, reflecting the gray clouds above. For a second, I thought I saw movement in the upstairs window, a curtain twitching, but Sarah had said Mark was away and the kids were at camp. Inner monologue. I gripped the leashes tighter. My father used to tell me that charity always comes with a price tag, usually hidden in the fine print. I was about to walk through the front door of a woman who valued appearance over oxygen, dragging 2 shedding dogs in a suitcase full of grief into her sterile world. I did not know the price tag yet, but I should have known that $5,000 was just the down payment. Coming? Sarah stood at the door, holding it open just wide enough for her body, blocking the entrance like a gatekeeper. Her smile did not reach her eyes. Her eyes were calculating the square footage of dirt my shoes might carry. Coming, I said, and I stepped across the threshold. The incident happened in the blink of an eye, a moment of biological urgency that would dictate the rhythm of the next 72 hours. We were standing on the front porch, a sprawling expanse of slate gray brick that looked less like a walkway and more like an art installation. I was fumbling with the handle of my suitcase, trying to keep my grip while balancing the bag of dog food on my shoulder. Luna, my sweet, geriatric golden retriever, let out a low whimper. The long drive had been hard on her bladder, and the excitement of the new smells was too much. Before I could pull her toward the grass, she squatted. A stream of yellow liquid pooled onto the slate bricks of the porch, just inches from the welcome mat. No, the scream that tore from Sarah's throat was not human. It was a guttural, primal sound, like someone witnessing a murder. I dropped the suitcase. The loud thud made Bear bark, a sharp, booming sound that echoed against the colonial facade. Sarah jumped back, pressing her body against the white siding of her house, as if the urine were acid that might splash and melt her linen pants. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the spreading puddle with genuine horror. "Sarah, I am so sorry," I gasped, reaching into my pocket for the waste bags I always carried. though they were useless for liquid. I will clean it up right now. Do you have a hose? Or a bucket? She did not answer immediately. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving under the cashmere cardigan. She looked at me, then at Luna, who was now wagging her tail apologetically, oblivious to the crime she had committed. It is seeping, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. It is just on the bricks. Sarah, it is outside, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. I will wash it away. It will rain eventually anyway. No, you do not understand. Sarah shook her head frantically. Slate is porous. Nora, it absorbs. It holds the bacteria. It holds the toxins. She spun around and vanished into the house. I stood there, humiliated, holding two confused dogs on a leash while my father's funeral clothes wrinkled in my bag. I expected her to return with a bucket of water. Instead, she came back wearing yellow rubber gloves that went up to her elbows and a white face mask. She was carrying a gallon jug of industrial-strength bleach and a stiff bristled scrub brush. She poured the undiluted bleach directly onto the porch. The smell hit me instantly, a chemical punch to the gut that made my eyes water. The fumes swirled around us, overpowering the scent of the autumn leaves. Sarah got down on her hands and knees. She began to scrub. Inner monologue. I watched her scrub. She was not just cleaning a mess. She was attacking it. Her arm moved with a violent, rhythmic intensity. Scrape, scrape, scrape. I wanted to tell her to stop. I wanted to tell her that bleach would discolor the stone far worse than dog urine ever could. But the look in her eyes, a glazed, manic focus, silenced me. This was my fault. I was the intruder bringing filth into her kingdom. Sarah, please, let me do that, I pleaded. Stepping forward, stay back, she snapped, her voice muffled by the mask. Do not track it further. Just Saoyuting Haoling. 2 hash is greater than just wait there until I have neutralized the area. It took her 10 minutes. 10 minutes of scrubbing a spot that had been clean after the first 10 seconds. When she finally stood up, sweating and smelling of chlorine, the slate brick was a pale, bleached white scar against the gray. She peeled off the gloves and dropped them into a trash bag she had brought out, treating them like biohazard waste. She looked at me, her face pale, the mask now hanging from one ear. I am sorry, I yelled. She said, her voice tight and devoid of warmth. I just, Saoyuting Haoling, 2 hash is greater than this house is my sanctuary. Nora, it is all I have. When things get Saoyuting Haoling, coxy, messy, Saoyuting Haoling, 2 hash is greater than I feel like I am losing control. You understand, right? With everything happening with your dad, she had weaponized my grief to justify her outburst. I understand. I lead. We entered the house through the garage, following a new protocol she invented on the spot. I had to wipe the dog's paws with antiseptic wipes she provided. I had to take off my shoes and place them in a specific plastic bin. My suitcase wheels were wiped down with Clorox. The interior of the house was breathtakingly cold. Not temperature cold, but emotionally frigid. The walls were a stark, gallery white. The furniture was beige, cream, and eggshell. There were no personal photos on the walls, no stray magazines on the coffee table. It looked like a page torn from a catalog where no human actually lived. Sarah led me past the sweeping staircase that led to the 2nd floor. So, about the sleeping arrangements, she said, not looking at me. I know I mentioned the guest suite upstairs, but with the Ling dos incident, Ling 2 hashes greater than, and seeing how big the dogs are, I think it is better if you stay on the ground floor. She stopped at the entrance to the sunroom. It was a beautiful room with floor-to-ceiling windows, but it was separated from the rest of the house by French doors. I have set you up in here, she said, gesturing to a pull-out sofa. That way, Luna and Bear can be with you, and they will not have to navigate the stairs. It is better for their hips, right? She was framing my demotion as an act of kindness. That makes sense, I said quietly. Thank you. I walked into the room. The sofa was already pulled out, but instead of cotton sheets, the mattress was covered in a thick, crinkling plastic sheet. It looked like the kind of covering used for toddlers who wet the bed, just in case, Sarah said, leaning against the doorframe, her arms crossed. I cannot risk the upholstery. That sofa is vintage Italian. She did not leave immediately. She stood there, watching, as I commanded Luna and Bear to lie down on their blankets in the corner. She watched as I unzipped my bag. Her eyes were like scanners, searching for the next violation. Dinner is at 6, she said. I ordered salads. I am doing a cleanse, so there is no meat in the house. I assume that is fine? That is perfect, I said. Great. Oh, and Nora? Yes, please try to keep them on the blankets. I can hear their claws clicking on the hardwood from the kitchen. It is like Ling, 2 hashes greater than nails on a chalkboard to me. She closed the French doors, sealing me in. That evening was a blur of uncomfortable silence. We ate our salads at a glass dining table that felt fragile enough to shatter if I put my fork down too hard. Sarah talked about her neighborhood association, about the battles she fought to keep people from planting the wrong kind of hydrangea bushes. She never asked how I was feeling. She never asked about the funeral arrangements. She only talked about order, rules, and the envy of her neighbors. By 9 o'clock, I excused myself, claiming exhaustion. I retreated to the sunroom and closed the doors. I laid down on the plastic-covered mattress. Every time I moved, the plastic crinkled loudly, a sharp, artificial sound that echoed in the quiet house. Crinkle, snap, crinkle. Luna curled up next to the bed, letting out a heavy sigh. I reached down and stroked her velvet ears. Inner monologue. I should have left then. I should have packed up the car, driven to a Motel 6, and slept in a room that smelled of stale cigarettes but offered freedom. But I was paralyzed by a toxic mix of gratitude and intimidation. Sarah was doing me a favor. Sarah had a big house. Sarah was successful. If I left, I would be the ungrateful friend. I would be the mess she accused me of being. I stared up at the ceiling fan, watching the blades slice through the shadows. The house was silent, but it was not peaceful. It was the silence of a held breath. Then I heard it. Footsteps, soft, padded footsteps approaching the French doors. I froze, my hand stilling on Luna's head. Through the glass panes, illuminated by the moonlight filtering in, I saw a silhouette. It was Sarah. She was standing there, just on the other side of the glass, staring into the room. She was not moving. She was just watching me, watching the dogs, checking to see if we were destroying her sanctuary. She stood there for a full minute, a dark specter in her own home. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away. I pulled the scratchy blanket up to my chin. The plastic beneath me roared in protest. I realized then that I was not a guest. I was a contamination that she was trying to contain, and the containment had only just begun. The sound of my stay at Sarah's house was not the barking of my dogs or the hum of conversation. It was the sound of adhesive tape peeling off a cardboard roll. Zip, rip, zip, rip for the next 48 hours. That sound became the soundtrack to my existence. It followed me like a mosquito in a dark room. Every time I moved, every time I stood up from the plastic-covered sofa, every time I walked to the kitchen to get a glass of water, Sarah was there. She would appear behind me, armed with a lint roller, her eyes fixed not on my face, but on the fabric of my sweater or the back of my jeans. She would not say a word at first. She would just sigh, a long, heavy exhalation through her nose that sounded like a tire losing air. Then she would lunge. She would run the sticky roller down my back, over my shoulders, and down my legs. She did it with a violent efficiency, pressing hard enough to bruise. "Hold still," she would murmur, peeling off a gray sheet of tape covered in golden fur. "Look at this, Nora. Just look at it. It is everywhere. It is airborne." I felt less like a guest and more like a walking biohazard. I spent those days in a state of perpetual apology. I kept Luna and Bear confined to the sunroom, only taking them out through the side door for quick, terrified bathroom breaks in the far corner of the yard. Even then, Sarah would watch from the kitchen window, her silhouette framed by the white curtains, making sure we did not step on the wrong patch of ornamental grass. The tension reached its breaking point on the morning of the third day. I was packing my bag, preparing for the funeral service, which was scheduled for noon. I was wearing my black dress, trying to fix my hair in the reflection of the sunroom door because I was afraid to use the guest bathroom mirror and leave a smudge. Sarah entered the room. She was holding a cup of coffee, keeping it close to her chest as if protecting it from contamination. "You are leaving right after the service?" she asked. I nodded, zipping up my garment bag. "Yes, I think it is best. The dogs are howling. 2# is greater than restless, and I need to get back to work." Sarah took a sip of her coffee, her eyes narrowing over the rim of the mug. "It is probably for the best," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "To be honest, I have been really worried about Leo." Leo was her 10-year-old son, currently away at a sailing camp in Maine. "Why? Is he okay?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "Did something happen at camp?" "No, not yet," Sarah said darkly. "But he comes home in 2 days, and with the amount of dander in here, howling, 2# is greater than I mean. The air quality is heavy. Nora, can you feel it?" "It feels thick." I sniffed the air. It smelled of bleach and lavender air freshener. It smelled sterile. "I do not smell anything," I said weakly. Sarah gave a condescending little laugh. "Of course you do not. You are nose blind to it. You live in it. But Leo, howling. Zwei Raute ist größer as he has such sensitive lungs. If he walks into this house and has an attack, howling, 2# is greater than well. I do not even want to think about the hospital bills or the trauma." She let the sentence hang there, a guillotine blade suspended above my neck. She was suggesting that my presence was physically endangering her child. The guilt washed over me, hot and suffocating. "I am so sorry, Sarah," I stammered, grabbing my suitcase. "I will strip the bed. I will sweep the floor before I go. I will leave cash for the cleaning lady." "No, do not touch anything," she commanded, stepping back as I approached. You will just spread it around. Just. Sao Yu Tsing Hao Ling. Dua. Go. Focus on your dad. We will handle the decontamination. Inner monologue. Decontamination. She used that word like I was radioactive waste. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that Luna and Bear were therapy dogs who visited nursing homes, that they were cleaner than her soul. But I was broken. My father was dead. My bank account was empty, and my confidence was shredded. So I just nodded. I took the shame she handed me and put it in my pocket. I left an hour later. I did not hug her goodbye. I could not bear the thought of her lint rolling her shirt the moment I pulled away. I drove to the funeral, stood by the grave in the rain, and then drove straight back to Seattle. I drove for 3 days, sleeping in rest stops, just to put as much distance as possible between me and the white-walled prison of number 42, Oak Ridge Lane. 1 week passed. I was back in my studio apartment. The rain in Seattle was comforting. It washed away the memory of the pristine Connecticut lawn. I was slowly putting my life back together, sorting through the pile of overdue bills and condolence cards. The knot in my stomach had started to loosen. I convinced myself that the awkwardness with Sarah was just grief manifesting as tension. We were both stressed. It was over now. Then, my phone buzzed. It was a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my desk, trying to focus on a logo design for a local bakery. The screen of my phone lit up with a notification. New email from Sarah Miller. Subject: Invoice for remediation services. I frowned. Remediation? That sounded like something you did for mold or asbestos. I opened the email. There was no greeting. No, how are you holding up? Or thinking of you. There was just a portable document format attachment. I clicked on it. The document that opened was professional. It had a letterhead with Sarah's address centered at the top. Below that, a breakdown of charges that made the blood drain from my face. Professional deep clean service, emergency rush, $600. Sanitization of hardwood floors. Specialized enzyme treatment, $400. Heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system purge and filter replacement. Whole house, $1,200. Upholstery, steam clean, vintage Italian velvet, $800. Emotional distress and management fee, $2,000. Total due, $5,000. I stared at the number, $5,000. My hands began to shake. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. I read it again, thinking I had misread a decimal point. But no, the number was 5,000. I scrolled down to the bottom of the portable document format. There was a note, typed in bold font. Note: the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning replacement was necessary because the dander levels posed a critical health risk to Leo upon his return. We could not risk his asthma triggering a fatal attack. Please remit payment within 48 hours to avoid further escalation. Asthma. She was charging me over $1,000 because her son had asthma. I sat back in my chair, the room spinning slightly. $5,000 was everything I had. It was the money from selling my dad's truck. It was my rent for the next 3 months. It was my safety net. I felt a surge of nausea. I reached for my water bottle, my fingers trembling so hard I almost knocked it over. I needed to think. I needed to understand. Inner monologue. I am a terrible person. I almost killed her child. That is what my brain told me first. The gaslighting had worked. For a full minute, I believed her. I calculated how I could take out a loan. I thought about selling my car. I was ready to pay for my sins. But then, a small, Sharp memory pricked at the back of my mind. College, 10 years ago. Sarah and I were roommates. We had gone for a run around the campus lake. I remembered struggling to keep up with her. I remembered her laughing, her chest heaving but strong. I remembered her bragging about her genetics. My family has lungs of steel. She had said, "We are runners." I grabbed my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name Jessica. Jessica was another friend from our college group. She still lived on the East Coast and stayed in closer touch with Sarah than I did. We had not spoken in 2 years, but desperation made me bold. I hit the call button. "Hello?" Jessica's voice was cheerful, confused. "Nora, is that you?" "Hey, Jess," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I am so sorry to call out of the blue. Saoyutsing Haling. 2# is greater than. I just got back from my dad's funeral." "Oh, Nora, I heard about that. I am so sorry. How are you?" "I am hanging in there. Listen, this is going to sound weird, but I stayed with Sarah last week." "Oh, wow." Jessica laughed. "Brave soul. How is the Stepford wife life treating her?" "It was Saoyutsing Haling. Too intense," I said. "But Jess, I have a question. Does Sarah's son, Leo, Saoyutsing Haling, 2# is greater than does he have asthma?" There was a pause on the line, a silence that stretched for 3 heartbeats. "Asthma?" Jessica asked, her tone shifting from polite to puzzled. "Leo?" "Yes, severe asthma. Like hospital-grade asthma." Jessica snorted. Then she laughed, a loud, genuine, belly laugh that crackled through the speaker. "Nora, are you kidding me? Leo is the captain of the junior cross-country team. The kid runs 5 miles before breakfast. He does not have asthma. He barely has allergies." "Who told you that?" The world stopped spinning. The nausea vanished, replaced by a cold, hard knot of ice in the center of my chest. "Sarah did," I whispered. "She told me he has severe asthma." Jessica Seahill. "Oh, Nora, you know how Sarah is. She loves the drama. She probably just wanted you to take your shoes off or something. She is pathological. Do not let her get in your head." I thanked Jessica and hung up. I stared at the phone. The screen was black now, reflecting my own face. My eyes looked different than they had in the mirror at Sarah's house. The fear was gone. The guilt was gone. She had lied. She had watched me scrub my own suitcase with bleach. She had watched me cower in her sunroom. She had watched me leave my father's funeral early because I was terrified of hurting her child. And it was all a lie. I looked back at the invoice on my computer screen. Heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system purge. $1,200. It was not a bill for cleaning. It was a tax on my vulnerability. She saw a grieving woman with a rental Cadillac, and she decided to cash out. She did not care about the dander. She did not care about her floors. She wanted money, and she used a non-existent disease of her own child to get it. My hand curled into a fist on the desk. Inner monologue. For the first time in 10 days, I did not feel like crying. I felt a heat rising in my throat, but it was not sadness. It was rage. Pure, distilling rage. She thought I was weak. She thought I was the mousy girl from college who would apologize for taking up space. She thought I would write a check just to make the problem go away. I opened a new email draft. I typed Sarah's address. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could pay it. I could block her. I could walk away. But then I looked down at Luna, sleeping by my feet. I remembered Sarah looking at Luna with disgust, calling her a monster, calling her filth. I was not going to pay, not a single cent, but I was not just going to refuse. I was going to make sure she understood exactly who she was dealing with. I closed the laptop with a snap. The sound echoed in the quiet apartment, sharp and definitive, like the cocking of a gun. I sat at my desk in Seattle with my hands hovering over the keyboard. Outside, the rain was hammering against the window pane, a rhythmic drumming that usually calmed me. Today, it sounded like a countdown. I had spent the last hour drafting and redrafting my response to Sarah. I deleted the angry paragraphs where I called her a liar. I deleted the sentences where I exposed her son's athletic achievements. I needed to be the adult in the room. I needed to de-escalate this before it turned into a war I could not afford to fight. I took a deep breath and typed the final version. Sarah, I understand that having guests can be stressful. While I maintain that the dogs did not cause damage to the infrastructure of your home, I want to be fair regarding the cleaning. I am willing to pay $300 to cover a professional deep clean of the sunroom and the porch. This is my final offer. I hit send. I watched the progress bar slide across the top of the screen. Sent. I leaned back in my chair, my heart rate spiking. $300 was still a stretch for me right now, but it was cheaper than a lawyer. It was a peace offering. I hoped that once she saw cash on the table, her greed would be satisfied, and she would move on to her next victim. I was wrong. My phone rang less than 2 minutes later. The screen lit up with her name, Sarah Miller. I stared at it. The phone vibrated against the wood of my desk, buzzing like an angry hornet. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but I knew that silence would only provoke her. I slid the green icon across the screen and lifted the phone to my ear. Hello, Sarah. I expected yelling. I expected tears, but her voice was terrifyingly calm. It was low, smooth, and laced with a venomous condescension that made the hair on my arms stand up. $300, she repeated slowly. Is that a joke? Nora, did you miss a zero? I am not missing anything. Sarah, I said, keeping my voice steady. I checked the rates for cleaning services in Westport. $300 is more than generous for one room and a porch scrub. Generous? She laughed, a sharp, barking sound. You came into my sanctuary. You brought those beasts into my home. And now you want to throw pennies at me like I am the help? It is not pennies, I said, and they are not beasts. Listen to me. Nora, Sarah's voice dropped an octave. I know about the inheritance. I froze. What? Do not play dumb, she hissed. Your father owned that property in Washington. I saw the car you drove. I saw the designer bag you were hiding in your trunk. You are sitting on a pile of cash, and you are trying to stiff a friend who opened her home to you in your darkest hour? It is disgusting. Inner monologue. I felt the blood drain from my face. She had been watching. She had been calculating. The designer bag was a thrift store find from 3 years ago. The car was a rental upgrade. The property she mentioned was mortgaged to the hilt and currently worth less than the debt attached to it. But facts did not matter to her. In her mind, I was a walking automated teller machine, and she felt entitled to make a withdrawal. I do not have an inheritance. Sarah, I said, my voice shaking with frustration. I am in debt. The car was a rental. Liar. She spat. You are just cheap. You have always been cheap. Well, guess what? My son's health is not cheap. The heating, ventilation, and air conditioning guy just left. He said the dander has infiltrated the ductwork. The whole system needs to be replaced. Not cleaned, replaced. That is impossible. I argued. I was there for 3 days. The dogs never went near the vents. The quote is now $6,000. Sarah interrupted. And if you do not wire the money by tomorrow morning, I am going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. She hung up. The silence that followed was heavier than the air in the room. I put the phone down, my hand trembling. $6,000. She was just making up numbers now. She was testing to see how far she could push me. I stood up and paced the small length of my apartment. Luna watched me from her bed, her tail thumping uncertainly against the floor. It is a bluff, I told myself. She will not do anything. She cares too much about her image to make a scene. My phone pinged, then it pinged again, and again. A rapid-fire succession of notifications that sounded like popcorn popping. I walked over to the desk and picked up the phone. The notifications were from Facebook. I had been tagged in a post. My stomach dropped. I tapped the icon. The post was in the Westport Community Watch Group, a public page with over 15,000 members. But Sarah had also shared it to her personal timeline and tagged me, ensuring that every mutual friend from college, every distant relative, and every professional contact I had could see it. The headline read, "Beware, Animal Abuser and Home Wrecker." Below the text were 3 photos. The first photo showed the sunroom, but it was not the room I had left. The cushions were thrown on the floor. There was a dark stain on the rug that definitely was not there when I left. It looked like someone had spilled coffee and smeared it to look like feces. The second photo was a close-up of a scratch on a hardwood floor. A deep, jagged gouge that looked like it had been made with a screwdriver, not a dog's claw. The third photo was of me. It was a picture taken from afar, without my knowledge, while I was loading the dogs into the car. In the photo, I looked disheveled and angry, yanking on Luna's leash. The angle made it look like I was hurting her. I read the caption, my vision blurring. I opened my heart and my home to an old friend in need, Nora Vance. And this is how she repaid me. She allowed her untrained, aggressive dogs to destroy my historic home. She left feces on my antique rugs. Worst of all, her negligence has triggered a life-threatening asthma attack for my 10-year-old son, who is now being monitored by specialists. When I asked her to help with the cleaning costs, she laughed in my face and told me to get over it. Please share this so no one else falls victim to this toxic, selfish woman. Justice for Leo. Animal cruelty. Beware. I gasped, the air leaving my lungs as if I had been punched. A life-threatening asthma attack. Leo was not even home yet. I scrolled down to the comments. They were already rolling in. Disgusting behavior. People like this should not own pets. I hope you sue her for everything she is worth. Sarah, sending prayers for Leo. She looks unstable in that photo. Call animal control. Nora Vance? Is that the graphic designer? I will make sure my company never hires her. Inner monologue. I felt the room spinning. This was not just a dispute anymore. This was an assassination. She was not just coming for my money. She was coming for my reputation, my career, and my dignity. She knew exactly which buttons to press to incite a mob. Children and animals. If you threaten those, the internet will tear you apart without asking for proof. I sat on the floor, clutching the phone. The screen was a window into a nightmare where I was the villain. I wanted to reply. I wanted to type in all caps that she was a liar, that her son was a cross-country runner with lungs of steel, that the stain was fake, but I knew how it would look. A defensive, frantic woman arguing with a grieving mother. I would look guilty. Another message popped up. This one was a direct message from a number I did not recognize. We know where you live. You better pay up before we call the cops on your dogs. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the shock. They were threatening Luna and Bear. I looked at my dogs. Bear was chewing on a toy, completely unaware that his existence was being used as leverage in a suburban extortion scheme. Sarah had unleashed a monster. She had weaponized her community, her lies, and her own child to crush me. And the terrifying part was, it was working. I felt small. I felt dirty. I felt completely and utterly alone. I curled my knees to my chest. The walls of my apartment felt like they were closing in. I was trapped between a lie and a debt I could never pay. But as I sat there, reading the hateful comments, something caught my eye. A comment from a user named Mark Miller. It was just a single emoji. A sad face. It was deleted 3 seconds later. Mark, her husband, the man who was supposedly away on business, the man who owned the house with her, he was watching, and he was afraid. I stared at the spot where the comment had been. Sarah was projecting an image of a united front, of a family under siege. But that deleted comment told a different story. There was a crack in the foundation of number 42, Oak Ridge Lane, and if there was a crack, I could break it open. I wiped the tears from my face. I stood up. I was not going to reply on Facebook. I was not going to send the money. I was going to find out what Sarah was really hiding. Because people who go to these lengths for $5,000 are not just greedy, they are desperate. And desperation makes people sloppy. The vibration of my phone against the wooden desk was no longer a notification. It was a physical assault. My screen was a blur of hate. Strangers from a town 3,000 miles away were dissecting my character, calling me a parasite, a slub, and a danger to society. I tried to block the numbers, but they kept coming. It was a digital firing squad, and Sarah Miller was the commander giving the order to shoot. I sat there, frozen, watching the battery percentage drop as the screen lit up relentlessly. I felt a phantom itch on my skin, the ghost of Sarah's lint roller, as if her judgment had traveled across the country to find me. Then the tone changed. A new email landed in my inbox. It did not have the frantic subject line of a hate mail. It was cold, aformal, and terrifying. Subject: Notice of intent to sue. Miller versus Vance. My fingers felt numb as I clicked it open. The letterhead belonged to a firm called Preston and Associates. I did not know then that Preston was just Sarah's tennis partner's husband, a real estate attorney doing a favor. All I saw was the legal jargon designed to intimidate. Dear Miss Vance, we represent Mistress Sarah Miller regarding the catastrophic damages sustained to her property at 42 Oak Ridge Lane. Independent assessment has revealed that the scratching damage to the imported French oak flooring is irreparable. The urine saturation has compromised the subfloor integrity. Furthermore, the emotional distress caused to the minor child, Leo Miller, has resulted in significant medical monitoring costs. I scanned down the page, my breath hitching in my throat. I was looking for the number to settle this matter out of court and avoid a public lien on your assets. Our client demands the sum of $20,000. $20,000. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk to keep from falling out of my chair. $20,000? That was not a repair bill. That was a year of rent. That was a new car. That was an impossible, suffocating amount of money that I did not have. Inner monologue. She thinks I am rich. The The realization hit me with the force of a slap. She saw the rental Cadillac. She saw me pay for dinner once. She assumed my father left me a fortune. She is not asking for reimbursement. She is asking for a payout. She thinks she is entitled to a piece of a pie that does not even exist. I grabbed my phone. I did not care about the strategy anymore. I dialed Sarah's number. She answered on the first ring. "I hope you are calling to ask for the wire transfer details," she said. Her voice was light, conversational, as if we were discussing brunch plans. $20,000? I screamed, my voice cracking. "Are you insane, Sarah? I do not have $20,000. I am broke. The car was a rental. My dad died in debt." There was a pause on the other end, a long, calculating silence. "Stop lying, Nora," she said, her voice dropping to that cold, flat tone. "I saw the way you live. I saw your clothes. You are just being greedy. You want to keep it all for yourself while my house sits in ruins. While my son suffers? Your son is not suffering," I yelled. I called Jessica. "I know Leo does not have asthma. I know he is a cross-country runner." The silence that followed was different this time. It was sharp, dangerous. I had caught her in a lie. And for a narcissist like Sarah, that was the ultimate offense. "You think you are so smart," she whispered. "You think because you talked to some irrelevant friend from college that you are off the hook? I am not paying you, Sarah. Not a dime." "Fine," she said. "Then we will do this the hard way. What are you going to do? Sue me for money I do not have? Go ahead. The court will see right through you." "Oh, I am not going to wait for the court, Nora." Sarah let out a soft, chilling laugh. "I know where you live. I have your address from the condolence card I sent. And I know the local laws in Seattle." My stomach twisted. "What are you talking about?" "I have already drafted a report to Seattle Animal Control," she said. "I have photos of the aggressive behavior. I have photos of the damage. I have witness statements from my neighbors saying your dogs were vicious. If I submit this report, they will come for Luna and Bear." I stopped breathing. My eyes darted to the corner of the room where Luna and Bear were sleeping, their paws twitching in a dream. "You would not," I whispered. "They take aggressive dogs seriously, Nora," she continued, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Especially when there is a history of property destruction. They will seize them. They will put them in a cage. And if the investigation confirms my report, 2 hash is greater than, well, they put dangerous dogs down. Do they not?" The world went silent. The sound of the rain against the window faded. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. She was threatening to kill them. She was not just coming for my money. She was holding a gun to the heads of the only family I had left. She was going to have my dogs murdered by the state just to squeeze a check out of me. "Sarah, please," I begged, my voice breaking into a sob. "Do not do that. They are all I have. Then pay up," she hissed. "You have 24 hours. If I do not see a confirmation number by noon tomorrow, I hit send on the report, and I will make sure they come with a catch pole." Click. She hung up. I sat there, the phone slipping from my sweaty palm and clattering onto the floor. I could not breathe. My chest felt like it was being crushed by a vice. I looked at Luna. She lifted her head, sensing my distress, and trotted over. She rested her heavy, golden head on my knee and looked up at me with those soulful, trusting brown eyes. She trusted me to protect her. I had been weak. I had been polite. I had been the mourning daughter trying to keep the peace. I had let Sarah walk all over me because I was afraid of conflict. I had let her shame me, gaslight me, and rob me of my dignity. But she had made a fatal mistake. She threatened the dogs. I reached out and buried my fingers in Luna's soft fur. I felt the steady beat of her heart. A cold clarity began to wash over me, displacing the panic. The tears stopped flowing. My breathing slowed. Inner monologue. Sarah Miller thinks she is playing a game with a victim. She thinks I am the same pushover who used to do her laundry in college because she claimed she was allergic to detergent. She thinks she can terrorize me into submission. I stood up. I walked to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. My face was blotchy, my eyes red, but the fear behind them was gone. It was replaced by something hard, something ugly. She wanted $20,000. She wanted a fight. I walked back to my desk. I picked up the phone. I did not call her back. Instead, I opened a new browser tab. I typed in a search query, Public Property Records, Fairfield County, Connecticut, owner, Mark and Sarah Miller. I hit enter. The results loaded. I clicked on the tax assessor's database. There it was, number 42, Oak Ridge Lane. I scrolled down to the payment history. Status, delinquent, lien holder, First National Bank. Notice of default filed. August 15th, I stared at the screen. The perfect house, the sanctuary, the imported floors. It was all Ali. She was not rich. She was drowning. She was months away from losing everything. She needed my $20,000 to save her house. A dark, humorless smile touched my lips. She was not a powerful suburban queen. She was a desperate gambler who had bet everything on the wrong horse. She thought she was hunting a rabbit, but she had just cornered a wolf. I picked up my pen and a notepad. You want a war? Sarah, I whispered to the empty room. Okay, let us have a war. I was not going to pay her. I was going to destroy her. The revelation on my computer screen sat there, glowing in the dim light of my apartment. Notice of default. Those 3 words transformed Sarah from a terrifying predator into a desperate animal caught in a trap of her own making. But knowledge was not enough. I needed ammunition. I spent the next 6 hours diving into the digital abyss of Sarah's life. I paid $50 to a background check service. I scoured the public dockets of the Connecticut judicial system. What I found was a tragedy of suburban ambition gone rot. It was not just the mortgage. It was credit card debt. 6 lawsuits from credit card companies in the last 2 years. A judgment against Mark for a failed business venture involving luxury boat rentals. And then, the smoking gun. A lien placed on the house by a gambling website based in Malta. Sarah was not just broke. She was an addict. Her obsession with cleanliness, her frantic need for control, her terror of a single dog hair. It was all a psychological dam trying to hold back the chaos of her financial ruin. And I was the lifeline she had decided to strangle. My phone rang again. It was Sarah. She was calling to tighten the screws, to remind me of the ticking clock. I let it ring. Instead, I called the airline. I booked a red-eye flight back to Hartford for that night. I put Luna and Bear in the care of my trusted neighbor, a gruff retired mechanic who loved them more than he liked most people. I am going to settle this, I told him as I handed over the leashes. If anything happens to me, Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2 hash is greater than do not let anyone take them. He looked at my face, saw the hardness there, and just nodded. Go get them. Kid, I landed in Hartford at dawn. The air was gray and heavy with impending rain. I rented a car, an economy sedan this time. No more illusions, and drove toward Westport. But I did not go to Sarah's house. Not yet. I went to the town hall. I went to the clerk's office and requested physical copies of the foreclosure filings. I needed the paper in my hand. I needed the weight of her failure to be tangible. As I walked out of the building, clutching the manila envelope, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. TikTok. Nora, Leo is crying because he is afraid the bad dogs are going to hurt him. Do not make me call them. It was a lie. Leo was not even home yet, but the cruelty of using her son as a pawn made my blood run cold. I drove to a coffee shop near her neighborhood. I sat in the corner, watching the rain streak the window. I needed a plan. I could not just storm in and wave the papers. She would deny it. She would scream. She would call the police and say I was harassing her. I needed her to confess. I needed her to say it out loud. I opened my laptop and logged into a burner email account I had created. I sent a message to Sarah's primary address. Subject: Payment confirmation. Sarah, you win. I cannot risk the dogs. I have liquidated my savings. I have $20,000 in cash. I do not trust wire transfers because I do not want a paper trail if you decide to sue me later anyway. I am in town. I will bring the money to your house tonight at 7. Please have a settlement agreement ready for me to sign. I hit send. The response came 3 minutes later. Wise choice. 7 o'clock. Do not be late. And wipe your shoes. She took the bait. The promise of cash, untraceable, immediate cash, was too intoxicating for a desperate gambler to resist. I closed my laptop. The tragedy of it all hit me then. We were 2 women in our 30s, once friends who shared cheap pizza and dreams. Now, we were enemies in a sordid drama about money and lies. She had lost her soul to keep a house she could not afford, and I was about to lose my innocence to save the only thing I loved. Inner monologue. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of the laptop. I looked tired. I looked older, but I did not look like a victim anymore. I felt a strange, cold calm settling over me. It was the calm of the executioner. I was not going to her house to negotiate. I was going there to end her. I spent the afternoon preparing. I went to an electronics store. I bought a high-fidelity digital voice recorder. I tested it in the car, whispering threats to myself to ensure it picked up every nuance. I taped it to the inside of my jacket, right over my heart. Then I drove to her neighborhood. I parked down the street, watching the house. It looked just as perfect as it had a week ago. The lawn was immaculate. The windows were glowing with warm, inviting light. It was a beautiful lie. I saw Mark's car in the driveway. He was home. Good. I needed a witness. At 6:55, I pulled into the driveway. I took a deep breath. I touched the recorder through the fabric of my coat to make sure it was on. This ends tonight, I whispered. I walked up the slate path, the same path where Luna had had her accident. I could still see the faint, bleached white spot where Sarah had scrubbed away her sanity. I rang the doorbell. It echoed inside, a cheerful chime that belied the darkness waiting behind the door. The door opened. Sarah stood there. She was wearing a silk blouse and black trousers, dressed for a business transaction. Her face was triumphant. She looked at me, then at the heavy bag on my shoulder. "You are early," she said, stepping back to let me in. I stepped into the foyer. The smell of lavender and bleach hit me again, triggering a wave of nausea. But I swallowed it down. "Where is the agreement?" I asked, my voice flat. In the kitchen, she said. Come on. I followed her. Mark was sitting at the kitchen table. He looked terrible. His face was gray, his eyes sunken. He was staring into a glass of whiskey. He did not look up when I entered. Hello, Mark, I said. He flinched, glancing at Sarah before giving me a weak nod. Hey, Nora. Sarah stood by the island, tapping her manicured nails on the granite countertop. On the counter lay a single piece of paper and a pen. Let us see the money, she said. I placed my bag on the counter. I kept my hand on it. First, I want to hear you say it, I said quietly. Say what? Sarah scoffed. Say that you will leave my dogs alone. Say that the report to animal control is gone. Once I have the money, the draft is deleted, Sarah said. Her eyes locked on the bag. It is a simple transaction. Nora, you pay for the damage you caused, and we all move on. The damage? I repeated, unzipping the bag just an inch. You mean the scratch on the floor? The one that costs $20,000 to fix? Yes, Sarah said, her voice tightening. It is imported French oak. You have no idea how expensive it is to match the grain. I looked at Mark. He was staring at his glass, his hand shaking slightly. Mark, I said softly, is that true? Did my dog scratch the floor? Mark, Sarah snapped. Do not you dare. Mark looked up. His eyes were filled with a profound, exhausted misery. He looked at me, then at his wife. I unzipped the bag further. There was no money inside. Just stacks of cut-up newspapers sandwiched between two real $100 bills on top. It was a classic conman's prop, but from where she stood, it looked like a fortune. Sarah's eyes widened. She licked her lips. Just give it to me, she demanded, reaching out. Tell me the truth. Sarah, I said, pulling the bag back. Or I walk out that door and you never see a cent. Did Luna scratch the floor? Sarah's face twisted. The mask of the polite suburban mom cracked. The desperation poured out, ugly and raw. Who cares? She screamed, her voice shrill. Who cares if she did or did not? Look at this house. Nora, do you think this pays for itself? Mark lost his job 3 months ago. The bank is calling every hour. I need this. You have the money. You have the inheritance. Just give it to me. I stood perfectly still. The recorder against my chest was warm. So the floor was already damaged? I pressed. Yes. She shrieked. Mark dropped a wine cooler on it last Christmas. Are you happy? The floor is ruined. My life is ruined. But you, Sao Yuting Haoling, 2# is greater than you have everything handed to you. You owe me this. I looked at Mark. He closed his eyes. And Leo? I asked. The asthma? He is fine, Sarah yelled, slamming her hand on the counter. He is a camp. He does not have asthma. I just needed leverage. You would not have paid otherwise. You are too selfish. The silence that followed was deafening. She was panting, her chest heaving. She stared at the bag, waiting for me to hand it over. She thought she had won. She thought that by confessing her desperation, she had justified her extortion. I slowly zipped the bag closed. Thank you, Sarah, I said. That was all I needed. I reached into my coat and pulled out the recorder. The little red light was blinking steady and bright. Her eyes dropped to the device. The color drained from her face so fast, she looked like a corpse. What is that? She whispered. Your confession. I said. I turned to Mark. I am sorry. Mark, I said, but you need to get out of here. I turned and walked toward the door. Sarah screamed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated panic. She lunged across the island, grabbing for the recorder, grabbing for me. "No, you cannot. Give me that." She clawed at my coat. I shoved her back. She stumbled, crashing into the bar stools. "Get out of my house," she screamed. "I will kill those dogs. I will kill them." I stopped at the door. I looked back at her. She was a mess of silk and rage, trembling in her perfect kitchen. "You will not touch them, Sarah," I said coldly, "because if you come near me or my dogs again, this recording goes to the police, and then it goes to the bank, and then it goes to every single person in this town." I opened the door and stepped out into the rain. I walked down the path, the adrenaline crashing through my veins. I had the tape, I had the truth, but as I reached the car, I did not feel triumphant. I felt sick. I had seen the bottom of the human soul, and it was a black, empty pit. The rain was falling harder now, transforming the winding roads of Westport into slick, black ribbons that reflected the streetlights like spilled oil. My hands were shaking so violently that I could barely grip the steering wheel of the rental sedan. The digital voice recorder, taped to the inside of my coat, felt hot against my chest. Like a branding iron, it contained the truth. But in the silence of the car, the truth felt fragile. I had escaped the house, but I had not escaped the gravity of Sarah Miller. I checked the rearview mirror. No headlights followed me. I let out a breath I had been holding since I stepped off her slate porch. I needed to get to a hotel. I needed to upload the audio file to the cloud before something happened to the device. I needed to call my neighbor in Seattle and tell him to lock his doors. Then, the world exploded in blue and red. A police cruiser shot out from a side street, its lights blinding in the rainy darkness. The siren chirped, a sharp, aggressive whoop-whoop that made my heart hammer against my ribs. I pulled over to the shoulder, the tires crunching on wet gravel. Inner monologue. She called them. Of course she called them. A woman like Sarah does not lose a confrontation. She escalates it. She weaponizes the system because she believes the system was built for people like her, to protect them from people like me. I watched in the side mirror as the officer stepped out of his vehicle. He was wearing a yellow rain slicker, his hand resting instinctively on his belt. He walked with a purpose that terrified me. I rolled down the window. The cold rain lashed at my face. "License and registration," the officer said. He did not say good evening. He shone his flashlight directly into my eyes, blinding me. I handed him the rental agreement and my Washington driver's license. My hand trembled, causing the papers to rustle. "Miss Vance?" he asked, looking at the license. "Yes, officer." "Step out of the vehicle, please." Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. "Am I under arrest?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We received a 911 call from a residence on Oak Ridge Lane, he said, opening my door. "The homeowner alleges that you assaulted her and stole a substantial amount of cash. Step out of the car. Now." Assault, theft. She had doubled down. She was not just claiming I owed her money anymore. She was framing me for a felony. I stepped out into the rain. The water soaked through my coat instantly. The officer guided me to the back of my car, turning me around. I felt his hands patting me down, checking for weapons. "Officer, she is lying," I said, pressing my forehead against the cold metal of the car roof. "I did not touch her. I did not steal anything." "Mistress Miller stated you pushed her into a counter and took a bag containing $20,000, the officer said, his voice flat and professional. We need to search the vehicle for the stolen property. Go ahead, I said. There is no money. He signaled to his partner, who had pulled up in a second cruiser. They began to tear through my rental car. They opened the trunk. They unzipped my suitcase. They checked under the seats. I stood there in the rain, shivering. I felt a profound sense of violation. This was Sarah's power. She could snap her fingers, and men with badges would strip search my life on the side of a road. They found the bag I had used as a prop. Found it, the second officer shouted, holding up the black duffel bag. My heart stopped. He unzipped it. He pulled out the stack of newspapers. He flipped through the cut-up strips of the New York Times, looking for the cash. He found the 2 $100 bills on top. He frowned. It is just paper, he called out. Just newspaper. The first officer looked at me. His expression shifted from suspicion to confusion. Where is the money? Miss Vance? There was no money, I said, turning to face him. It was a bluff. I went there to get her to admit she was extorting me. Extorting you? The officer raised an eyebrow. That is a serious accusation. I reached into my coat. Do not reach, he barked, his hand dropping to his holster. I froze. I am just getting a recorder, I said slowly. It is taped to my jacket. I recorded the whole thing. Please, just listen to it. The officer hesitated. The rain dripped from the brim of his hat. He looked at the empty bag of newspaper, then at me. He nodded once. Slowly, I peeled the tape off my jacket. I held the small black device in my shaking hand. I pressed the play button. Sarah's voice cut through the sound of the rain. Shrill and undeniable. Saoyi Jingho Ling. 2 hash is greater than. The floor is ruined. My life is ruined. But you, Saoyi Jingho Ling. 2 hash is greater than you have everything handed to you. You owe me this. I skipped forward. Saoyi Jingho Ling. 2 hash is greater than Mark dropped a wine cooler on it last Christmas. Are you happy? And then, the damning confession about her son, Saoyi Jingho Ling. 2 hash is greater than he is fine. He is at camp. He does not have asthma. I just needed leverage. You would not have paid otherwise. The officer listened. He leaned in closer to hear over the sound of the passing cars. I watched his face. The hard lines of authority softened into something else. Disgust. He heard the desperation in Sarah's voice. He heard the admission of fraud. When the recording ended with the sound of the door slamming, silence hung between us for a long moment. The officer looked at his partner, then back at me. She told dispatch you beat her, he said quietly. She said she had bruises. She probably inflicted them on herself after I left. I said, or she is using makeup. Does that sound like a woman who was just beaten? Or does that sound like a woman who lost a negotiation? The officer sighed. He took off his hat and wiped the rain from his forehead. This is a civil matter, he muttered. He handed me back my license. So I am free to go? I asked. You are free to go, Miss Vance, but I suggest you leave town. If she files a formal statement at the station, we will have to investigate, recording or not. Do not give her a chance to make this uglier. I nodded. Thank you. I got back into the car. My legs were like jelly. I merged back onto the road, my vision blurred by tears of relief and rage. She had tried to have me arrested. She had tried to ruin my life because I refused to pay for her mistakes. I drove to a motel 2 towns over, a cheap place with neon lights buzzing outside. I double-locked the door and propped a chair under the handle. I was safe physically, but I knew the war was far from over. I opened my laptop and connected to the motel's spotty Wi-Fi. I logged into Facebook. My notifications were frozen. The sheer volume of incoming hate had crashed the app on my phone. On the laptop, it loaded slowly, and there it was. Sarah had gone live. The video had been posted 20 minutes ago. It already had 400 shares and over 1,000 comments. I clicked play. The video opened with a close-up of Sarah's face. She was crying. Mascara ran down her cheeks in perfect, tragic streaks. There was a red mark on her cheekbone, a bruise that looked suspiciously like blush applied with a heavy hand. "Please," she sobbed into the camera, her voice breaking. "I do not know what to do." I tried to be kind. I invited her into my home, and tonight, 小雨静好令, 2 hashes greater than tonight. She came back. She held up a trembling hand. She pushed me. She threw me against the counter. She stole the emergency cash we had saved for Leo's medical treatments. She screamed at me. 小雨静好令, 2 hashes greater than. She said she hates children. She said she hopes Leo dies. I stared at the screen, my mouth open. The audacity was breathtaking. She was rewriting reality in real time. "I am waiting for the police," Sarah continued, wiping her nose. "But I need you guys to know, Nora Vance is dangerous. She is a monster. Please, share this. Make sure she cannot hurt anyone else." The comments below the video were a tidal wave of vitriol. "Hunt her down. I am driving around looking for her car right now. Black Escalade, right? Someone needs to teach this woman a lesson." Inner monologue. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. The mob was mobilizing. They were looking for a black Escalade. Thank God I had rented a sedan, but it was only a matter of time. Sarah had spun a narrative so compelling, so emotionally charged, that the truth did not matter anymore. Unless 小雨静好令, or 静好大雨, unless I showed them the truth. I looked at the digital recorder sitting on the scratched laminate desk. I had planned to use it for legal leverage. I had planned to send it to her lawyer, but lawyers took days. The internet took seconds. If I waited, her lie would cement itself as the truth. By the time I cleared my name in court, my career would be dead. My reputation would be ash. I had to nuke the narrative. I plugged the recorder into my laptop. The file appeared on the screen. Voice 001.mp3. I opened video editing software. I did not have video, so I created a simple black background in white text centered on the screen. I typed the truth about number 42. I dragged the audio file onto the timeline. I boosted the volume. I cleaned up the background noise so Sarah's voice rang out crisp and clear. I listened to it one last time. I just needed leverage. You would not have paid otherwise. It was brutal. It was undeniable. I opened the Westport Community Watch page, the same page where Sarah was currently being hailed as a martyr. I clicked Create Post. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I knew that once I did this, there was no going back. This was not just defending myself. This was destroying her. This was humiliating her in front of the Parent-Teacher Association moms, the neighbors, the country club members, and the bank. But then I thought about the police officer searching my car. I thought about the threat to call animal control. I thought about Luna's trusting eyes. Sarah Miller had chosen violence. I was just choosing accuracy. I typed the caption. Sarah Miller claims I assaulted her and stole money. She claims her son has asthma. She claims my dogs ruined her floors. Tonight, I went to her house to get the truth. I did not touch her. I did not steal from her, but I did record her. Here is Sarah Miller, in her own words. admitting that her son is healthy, her floors were already broken, and that she is extorting me to pay her debts. Listen closely. I took a deep breath, inner monologue. Goodbye, Sarah. I clicked post. The progress bar spun. Blue, blue, blue. Posted. I sat back in the creaky motel chair and watched. For the first minute, nothing happened. The post sat there at the top of the feed, sandwiched between an ad for a landscaper and Sarah's viral video. Then, the first appeared, then a comment. User, Jennifer L. Comment. Wait. Sao Yu Ting Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than is this real? Then another. User, Mike the plumber. Comment. I worked on that house. I remember fixing that floor last year. She blamed her husband then. 2. Then the reaction started to change. The angry emojis on my post were not directed at me. They were directed at the audio. I refreshed the page. 50 comments. User, Soccer Mom 88. Comment. Did she just say she lied about Leo's asthma? My son is on his team. I knew it. User, HOA, President, Karen. Comment. This is absolutely disgraceful. Sarah, you started a fundraiser for medical bills last week. The tide was turning. It was not a ripple. It was a tsunami. I watched as the internet, a fickle and terrifying beast, realized it had been tricked. The rage that had been directed at me made a U-turn and barreled straight toward number 42. Oak Ridge Lane. My phone started buzzing, but this time, it was not hate mail. It was Sarah, calling. I stared at the screen. Sarah Miller. She was not calling to threaten me this time. The ringtone sounded frantic, desperate. I did not answer. I let it ring. I watched the screen turn black, then light up again with a text message. Take it down, please. Nora, I beg you, take it down. Mark is packing a bag. The neighbors are outside. Please. I read the message. I felt a pang of pity, sharp and brief. But then I remembered the yellow rain slicker of the police officer. I remembered the thread of the catch pole for Luna. I typed a reply. No. I turned off my phone. I laid down on the lumpy motel bed and listened to the rain. Outside, in the digital world, Sarah Miller's sanctuary was burning to the ground. And for the first time in 2 weeks, I closed my eyes and slept without fear. The morning sun that filtered through the thin, polyester curtains of the motel room did not bring warmth. It brought a harsh, clinical light that illuminated dust motes dancing in the air. I had slept for 4 hours, a dreamless, black unconsciousness, and woke up with the taste of stale coffee in my mouth. I reached for my laptop. It was sitting on the nightstand where I had left it, the battery light blinking red. I plugged it in and opened the lid. The screen exploded with activity. My post on the Westport Community Watch page had ceased to be a local dispute. It had been shared 25,000 times. It had migrated from Facebook to Twitter, and from Twitter to TikTok. Strangers were dissecting the audio, remixing Sarah's screeching voice over beats, and analyzing the psychology of her manipulation. But the real devastation was happening closer to home. I scrolled through the comments on the original thread. The people of Westport, the neighbors who had sipped wine on Sarah's slate porch, the mothers who had arranged playdates with her children, were now feasting on her carcass. User, Soccer Mom 88 wrote, I cannot believe I donated $50 to her Leo's lung health fundraiser last week. I am calling the platform to report fraud immediately. User, Golf Pro Dave wrote, She tried to get me kicked off the Homeowners Association board last year because my trash cans were visible from the street. She called it an eyesore. Now I find out she is living in a foreclosure? The hypocrisy is staggering. User Jessica B. wrote, I went to college with her. This is her pattern. She uses people. Nora, if you are reading this, we are all on your side. It was a landslide. The social capital Sarah had spent a decade hoarding. The perfect image. The charity work. The chairmanship of the garden committee had evaporated overnight. In the suburbs, reputation is currency. And Sarah was now bankrupt. My phone rang. It was an unlisted number. This is Nora. I answered, my voice raspy. Miss Vance? This is Detective Miller from the Westport Police Department. No relation to the suspect. I sat up straighter, clutching the sheet to my chest. Suspect? The word hung in the air, heavy and definitive. Am I still under investigation? Detective? I asked. No, ma'am, he said. His tone was brisk but respectful. The assault charges filed by Mistress Miller have been dropped. We are closing the file on the complaint against you. I let out a breath that shook my entire body. Thank you. Did she? Xiao Ting Hao Ling. 2# is greater than did she confess? Not exactly, the detective said, but we had a visitor at the station this morning. Mark Miller came in at 6 o'clock. Mark, the husband who had sat silently in the kitchen, drinking whiskey while his wife extorted me. He gave a voluntary statement. The detective continued. He corroborated your recording. He confirmed that the flooring damage was pre-existing, caused by him dropping a heavy object last winter. He also provided us with receipts proving that their son, Leo, has no history of asthma treatment and is, in fact, currently enrolled in an advanced athletics camp. He turned on her. I whispered, he did more than that. Ms. Vance. He handed over the secured digital card from their home security system. It captures the entire interaction in the kitchen. It shows clearly that you never touched her. It shows her lunging at you. It shows her screaming threats about your animals. Inner monologue. I closed my eyes. I could see Mark in my mind. That defeated man in the gray kitchen. I wondered what had finally broken him. Was it the fear of jail? Was it the public humiliation? Or was it simply the exhaustion of living a lie for so long? He had finally chosen the truth. But he had waited until the ship was already sinking to jump off. We are currently reviewing the footage for potential charges against Mistress Miller. The detective added, filing a false police report is a misdemeanor, but attempted extortion is a felony. And given the amount of money involved, Xiao Ting Hao Ling, 2# is greater than well. The district attorney is interested. Do I need to come in? I asked. Not today. You are free to go home. Miss Vance, go back to Seattle. If we need you for a grand jury, we will call. I hung up. I packed my bag. I checked out of the motel, but before I drove to the airport, I felt a magnetic pull. I needed to see it. I needed to see the aftermath with my own eyes. I drove back to Oak Ridge Lane. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets washed clean and glistening. As I turned the corner toward number 42, I saw them, news vans, 3 of them. They were parked on the manicured verge. Their satellite dishes extended toward the sky like robotic flowers. A reporter was standing on the sidewalk, microphone in hand, gesturing toward the white colonial house. But it was not just the media. There were cars slowing down as they passed, drivers craning their necks to gawk. There were neighbors standing in small clusters on their own lawns, arms crossed, staring at the house with expressions of grim satisfaction. The sanctuary had become a circus sideshow. I slowed my rental car to a crawl. The house looked different today. The blinds were drawn tight on every window. The perfect wreath on the front door had fallen, lying crooked on the slate porch. The recycling bins had been knocked over, spilling empty wine bottles onto the driveway, and no one had come out to pick them up. Then, the front door opened. Sarah stepped out. She was not wearing her linen pants or her cashmere cardigan. She was wearing a gray tracksuit and sunglasses that covered half her face. She looked small. She looked shrunken. She took 2 steps onto the porch and stopped. She saw the news vans. She saw the neighbors staring. She saw the spectacle of her own destruction. For a moment, she stood there, frozen. I watched her face through the telephoto lens of my own memory. I knew what she was feeling. It was not remorse. It was the frantic, suffocating panic of a narcissist who has lost her audience. A reporter shouted a question. "Mistress Miller, is it true you faked your son's illness for profit?" Sarah flinched as if she had been slapped. She turned around, fumbling with the doorknob, and fled back inside. The door slammed shut. The sound echoed down the street, final and hollow. I watched for another minute. I saw a landscaping truck pull up to the house next door. 2 men got out and started using leaf blowers. The noise was deafening, aggressive. They were blowing the leaves from the neighbor's yard onto Sarah's pristine driveway, a petty act of suburban warfare. A week ago, Sarah would have marched out there and threatened to sue them. Today, the house remained silent. Inner monologue. I realized then that the punishment was not going to be jail. Jail would be too easy. She would play the victim in jail. No, her punishment was this. It was living in that glass house while the world threw stones. It was the silence of her phone. It was the way the cashier at the grocery store would look at her. It was the foreclosure sign that would inevitably go up next week. Not as a tragedy, but as a punchline. I put the car in gear. I touched the recorder in my pocket one last time, feeling the hard plastic edges. I did not need it anymore. The truth was out there, independent of me, consuming everything in its path. I drove away from Oak Ridge Lane. I drove toward the highway, toward the airport, toward the life I had almost let her steal from me. I stopped at a gas station to fill up the rental before returning it. As the pump hummed, I checked my email. There was a notification from GoFundMe. Update: the campaign Help Leo Breathe has been suspended pending a fraud investigation. Refunds are being issued to all donors. I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the sharp, cold smile of a survivor. She had demanded $20,000 from me. In the end, it cost her everything. Her marriage, her home, her reputation, her standing in the tribe she so desperately wanted to lead. She had wanted to be the queen of the neighborhood. Now, she was its pariah. I got back in the car and merged onto the interstate. The sign overhead read Bradley International Airport, 20 miles. I was going home to Luna and Bear. I was going home to my cluttered apartment and my debt, but I was going home free. The flight back to Seattle was 6 hours of turbulence and silence. I sat in seat 24A, staring out at the quilt of clouds below, feeling a profound sense of hollowness. You would think that victory would taste sweet, like champagne or revenge, but it tasted like ash. It tasted like the bitter realization that I had spent 15 years calling a monster my friend. When I landed, the Seattle rain felt different. It was not the menacing, slick darkness of the Connecticut storm. It was a gentle, gray mist that wrapped around the city like a familiar blanket. I took a cab straight to my neighbor's house. The moment the door opened, Luna and Bear nearly knocked me over. They were a whirlwind of golden fur, vetnosis, and joyful whines. Luna pressed her head into my stomach, her tail thumping a frantic rhythm against my legs. Bear tried to climb into my arms. Forgetting he weighed 80 pounds, I sank to my knees on the porch, burying my face in their warm, musky necks. I cried not for my father, and not for the money, but for the sheer relief of touching something real. In a world of fake asthma and bleached slate, this unconditional love was the only truth left. "Hey, kid," my neighbor, Mr. Henderson, said softly, leaning against the doorframe. "You look like you went 12 rounds with a heavy weight." "I felt like it," I said, wiping my eyes. "But I won," he nodded, handing me a spare leash. "I saw the news. My granddaughter showed me on her phone. You went viral." I winced. "Is it bad?" "It is loud," he said, "but loud keeps the wolves away." I took the dogs home. My apartment was exactly as I had left it. A coffee mug with mold growing in it on the desk. A pile of unpaid bills on the counter. But the silence was not menacing anymore. It was mine. The next few weeks were a blur of administrative cleanup. The detective from Westport called me twice. Sarah was formally charged with attempted extortion and filing a false police report. She pleaded not guilty at her arraignment. But with the video evidence and Mark's testimony, her lawyer was already trying to cut a plea deal. Mark filed for divorce 3 days after the arrest. I saw the filing on a legal blog that was tracking the suburban scam mom case. He was seeking full custody of Leo and their daughter. He cited emotional instability and financial abuse as the grounds. The house, number 42, Oak Ridge Lane, went into foreclosure faster than expected. The bank did not wait. A "for sale by auction" sign was planted in the lawn, right next to the spot where Sarah had once placed her sign about respecting the sanctity of the grass. I did not feel glee reading these updates. I felt a dull ache in my chest. I thought about Leo, the boy who just wanted to run cross-country, now having his life dissected on message boards. I thought about the daughter who would have to go to school and hear whispers about her mother. Inner monologue. I destroyed her. I had to do it. It was self-defense. But watching a life dismantle brick by brick is not entertainment. It is a tragedy. I wondered if I could have done it differently. Could I have just blocked her number? Could I have just walked away? No, she threatened the dogs. That was the line. And once you cross that line, you do not get to ask for mercy. One afternoon, a package arrived at my apartment. It had no return address, but the postmark was from Connecticut. I opened it cautiously, half expecting a dead rat or a glitter bomb. Inside was a small, velvet box and a note. The note was handwritten on lined notebook paper, the handwriting shaky and unfamiliar. "Nora, I found this in Sarah's jewelry box. She told me she bought it with the money she saved from the household budget last year. I think it should go to you, not as payment. I know we can never repay you for the stress, but as an apology for my silence." I sat there and watched her do it. "I am sorry, Mark." I opened the velvet box. Inside was a diamond tennis bracelet. It was delicate, expensive, and sparkled under my kitchen lights. I stared at it. It was beautiful. It was probably worth $3,000. I closed the box. I did not want it. I did not want anything that had touched that house. I walked to my laptop and searched for local animal shelters in Seattle. I found a rescue organization that specialized in senior dogs, the ones that nobody wanted because they were too old or too sick. I drove to a pawn shop downtown. I sold the bracelet for $2,200. Then I drove to the shelter. I walked into the front office and placed the stack of cash on the counter. "This is a donation," I told the stunned volunteer, "for the old ones." Walking out of the shelter, the weight finally lifted. The money that had started this war, the greed, the entitlement, the desperation, had been transmuted into something good. It was the only way to close the loop. I went home and sat on my floor with Luna and Bear. I opened my design software. I had a deadline for a bakery logo. I had bills to pay. I had a life to rebuild. But as I worked, I found myself pausing, listening to the silence of my apartment. It was not lonely. It was peaceful. I realized that my small, messy life was a luxury. I did not have imported floors to worry about. I did not have a reputation to maintain. I was free to be imperfect, and that freedom was worth more than $20,000. 6 months later, the spring rain in Seattle had given way to a hesitant, blooming summer. The park near my apartment was a riot of color. Rhododendrons exploding in pink and purple, the grass lush and damp. I sat on a wooden bench, watching Luna and Bear wrestle in the dog run. Luna was slower now. Her hips were stiff in the mornings, and her muzzle was almost entirely white. Bear was still a goofy puppy at heart, chasing a tennis ball that he never quite managed to catch on the first bounce. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cheap bodega coffee, but it tasted fine. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a client email. Instead, it was a news alert. Viral suburban scam mom sentenced to community service and probation. I clicked the link. There was a photo of Sarah leaving the courthouse. She looked different. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, messy bun. She was not wearing makeup. She wore a baggy gray sweater and jeans that looked like they came from a discount rack. She was not looking at the cameras. She was looking at the ground, her shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. The article was brief. Sarah Miller had pleaded guilty to attempted grand larceny and filing a false report because she had no prior criminal record. The judge had been lenient with jail time. Instead of prison, she was sentenced to 500 hours of community service and 3 years of probation. She was also ordered to attend mandatory gambling addiction therapy. The final line of the article caught my breath. In a statement read by her attorney, Ms. Miller expressed remorse and stated that she has lost custody of her children and is currently residing in a halfway house for recovering addicts. She had lost the kids. I looked up from the screen. Across the dog park, a young mother was pushing a toddler on a swing, laughing as the child shrieked with delight. Sarah had lost the very thing she used as a shield. She had invoked her son's name to steal money, and the universe had answered by taking him away. I locked the phone screen and put it face down on the bench. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt the thrill of justice served. But looking at that photo of a broken woman in a gray sweater, all I felt was a quiet, somber resolve. I was not innocent in this story. I looked at Luna. I remembered the day I arrived at Sarah's house. I remembered the way I had let the dogs roam freely in a home that was not mine, assuming that my grief gave me a pass on basic etiquette. I had been presumptuous. I had been so wrapped up in my own sadness that I failed to see the cracks in my friend's life until they became chasms. If I had been more observant, If I had asked Sarah, "How are you really?" instead of just accepting her hospitality, maybe things would have been different. Maybe she would have told me about the debt. Maybe I could have helped her find a meeting instead of becoming her victim. But maybe not. Some people are drowning long before you ever see the water. Inner monologue. I learned a hard lesson that week in Connecticut. I learned that kindness without boundaries is just an invitation for abuse. I learned that the people who scream the loudest about sanctuary are usually the ones living in hell. And I learned that I am capable of cruelty when pushed into a corner. I destroyed Sarah, not because I enjoyed it, but because I had to. And I would do it again. Nora? I looked up. A woman was standing near the gate of the dog run. She looked vaguely familiar. Someone from the neighborhood, maybe a fellow dog walker. "Hi," I said. "I saw you on the news a few months ago," she said, hesitating. "You are the one with the crazy friend, right? The one who tried to steal your money?" I smiled. A tight, polite smile. "Yes, that was me. Good for you," the woman said, nodding vigorously. She got what she deserved. People like that are evil. She walked away, feeling satisfied with her judgment. I watched her go. Evil. It was such an easy word. It wrapped everything up in a neat little package. But Sarah was not a cartoon villain. She was a terrified, entitled, addicted woman who made a series of catastrophic choices. She was a human being who broke. I whistled. "Luna, Bear, let us go home." They trotted over, panting, tongues lolling out. I clipped the leashes onto their collars. I felt the sturdy weight of the leather in my hand. Control, connection, responsibility. We walked out of the park and onto the sidewalk. I did not have a mansion. I did not have imported floors. I did not have a perfect reputation. But as we walked down the street, my dogs pressing against my legs, I realized I had something Sarah Miller never did. I had enough. And in a world that is constantly trying to sell you more house, more status, more outrage, having enough is the only true sanctuary.